of a fish crawling out of the water onto the land and sprouting legs. But have they ever found anything like this? No, but you can go to museums and you can see all kinds of these alleged links and paintings and models. Here's an interesting one. It's a whale with legs, and it's walking out of the water. And this particular scientist, when he was hunting through fossil beds in the foothills of the Himalaya mountains, found a skull of a whale and some teeth. And he was very excited because this skull head was a long ways away from water, so he speculated that perhaps the whale had walked there in the past and then somehow it got buried. He didn't find any legs, so he got a grant from the U.S. government to go back the following year to see if he could find them. But meanwhile, he had an artist construct for us what he believed this creature may have looked like in the past. Or then there's Archaeopteryx. For years, claimed to be a link between birds and reptiles because it had teeth in its mouth and claws on its wings. But there are birds today that have claws on their wings. There are birds in the fossil record that have teeth in their mouths, and they're classified as birds. So why should these two characteristics prove that Archaeopteryx was part reptile and part bird? Incidentally, birds that are not any question whatsoever, birds have been found in the fossil record, and by the evolutionist dating techniques and methods, by the stratas, have dated older than Archaeopteryx. So many paleontologists today disregard Archaeopteryx as a potential link between one species and another. Nevertheless, there have been many proposed ideas on how birds have evolved. Here is a National Geographic piece of artwork demonstrating what they think the ancestors of birds looked like in the past. And the author of this particular article says that he too has a problem believing that this actually was an ancestor of his canary. Nevertheless, such ideas are put forward and proposed. Here's an argument between two different groups of evolutionary ideas on the origin of bird flight. One group of scientists believes that birds evolved this way. He says what happened was the ancestors were running along the ground chasing flying insects, which they nabbed with their teeth or their front legs. Longer feathers on the front legs evolved to act as an insect net, and so the legs became wings. Then they used the wings to make flapping leaps after insects. So they believe these things were running along and they had to evolve wings in order to catch insects. Or another group says, no, it didn't happen that way. The ancestors climbed up into trees, and then once they were in the tree, they had to learn how to glide from branch to branch, and so they evolved wings that way. But the question is, have we found any fossils where limbs are evolving into wings? Have we found scales becoming feathers? No. So how do we know that birds evolved from reptiles? We don't. And yet the idea is proposed. And to question such an idea is a religious, fanatical idea for many scientists. We could look at some other examples of links that have been proposed in the past. The Crossopterygian, claimed to have been a creature that lived 90 million years ago, was a link between fish and amphibian. And so whenever they found one of these particular fossils in the layers of the earth, they knew that the layer had to be at least 90 million years old because that's when, according to the geological column, they became extinct. Well, that was all fine and well until a relative of the Crossopterygian fish, the coelacanth, was found live and well caught off the coast of Madagascar in the 1930s. And so no longer could they state that this was a credible missing link, and the layers that had been dated certainly were an embarrassment to the evolutionists. Or the horse series has been claimed to be absolute proof of evolution, and we've all seen the charts showing a rabbit-sized creature at the bottom of the chart progressing and developing, becoming larger and more horse-like, and eventually modern horse at the top of the chart. But what most people are never told, that this chart was put together by neatly placing these creatures together in a sequential order by size. The fossils were found in India, North America, and South America, and then put together in the same chart. In some places, several of them are found in the same layer. They live together contemporaneously. And in some parts of the world, the chart's found upside down. In South America, The older members are the layers closer to the surface of the Earth, and the more modern layers are further down in the Earth. The chart is upside down. And if we look at a count of their rib pairs, they change from 18 to 15 to 19 back to 18. So how do we know that one evolved and developed into the other? We don't know. Well, one of my favorite missing links is this particular creature here. It's called the dinosauroid, and it actually is a fiberglass model. And it was formed from a tiny piece of jawbone found in Alberta, Canada, by a Dr. Dale Russell, a paleontologist from Ottawa, Canada. And he believes that his dinosauroid is what dinosaurs would have looked like had they evolved. Now, it's a piece of science fiction. And yet, it has traveled around the major museums around the world. It was here in Los Angeles. It's been in the Smithsonian. It's been in various museums in Canada. And people look at it, and they say, isn't it amazing what evolution has produced? Evolution hasn't produced this. This is man's mind. It's fictitious. It doesn't exist. It's a fiberglass model. But when people look at these particular things, they don't think for themselves. It's pseudoscience. Today, many people have looked to scientists without thinking for themselves, allowing scientists to think for them. Charles Darwin has stated, oh, that's not Charles Darwin, sorry. Charles Darwin has stated, by my theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed. Why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth? You see, in Darwin's day, they hadn't found any missing links. And you know what? They haven't found them today. They don't exist. They do not exist. And so that's why they've had to come up with a new theory for evolution. Because of lack of data, they say, well, there are no intermediates between species. So evolution must take place very quickly. It must go in leaps and spurts and jumps. Punctuated equilibrium. It's a theory based on no data. No intermediates between species. Dr. Colin Patterson from the British Museum of Natural History wrote this letter, which I'm going to read a portion to you, to Luther Sunderland, who appeared in the Evolution Conspiracy, has since passed away. And in this particular letter, as a curator of the museum, he said it this when he was asked why there weren't any missing links in one of the books that he had written. He said, I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil for which one could make a watertight argument. It is easy enough to make up stories of how one form gave rise to another and to find reasons why the stages should be favored by natural selection. But such stories are not part of science, for there is no way of putting them to the test. But you see, today, evolutionary ideas, in many cases, are just totally built upon stories. No physical evidence. You see, there are major changes that are taking place in evolutionary ideas today because Darwinian evolution can't be backed up by physical evidence. We're now moving into a new phase of evolution where we're looking to metaphysics to explain the origin of life. And one of these theories that's being put forward is called the new biology, the new paradigm, explaining that there is a force or energy in the universe which guides things from disorder to order. And that's exactly the direction that biology is headed. Darwinian evolution is bankrupt. There isn't any evidence to support it. And so now scientists are moving from a physical explanation to a metaphysical explanation. I refer to an article written in the Omni magazine. In fact, this entire Omni that was the October issue of 1991 is dedicated to evolution. And they talk about these new theories, these new concepts in evolutionary development, where they say an extraordinary new finding suggests that life forms may literally direct their own evolution. And the idea is that the environment guides life forms onward and upward. Incidentally, if you're familiar with the New Age movement, you'll see that punctuated equilibrium and this new paradigm, this new biology, fit in very well. Because the New Age is saying that man is on the verge of taking a step of evolution in the future. And speaking of man, isn't there evidence that apes have evolved and developed into modern man? Well, many people said, well, of course, we know that this happened. We've seen the pictures. We've seen the models. We've seen all of these representations that scientists have given us of what our ancestors looked like. But have we seen any fossils? And he was very excited because this skull head was a long ways away from water, so he speculated that perhaps the whale had walked there in the past and then somehow it got buried. He didn't find any legs, so he got a grant from the U.S. government to go back the following year to see if he could find them. But meanwhile, he had an artist construct for us what he believed this creature may have looked like in the past. Or then there's Archaeopteryx. For years, claimed to be a link between birds and reptiles because it had teeth in its mouth and claws on its wings. But there are birds today that have claws on their wings. There are birds in the fossil record that of a fish crawling out of the water onto the land and sprouting legs. But have they ever found anything like this? No, but you can go to museums and you can see all kinds of these alleged links and paintings and models. Here's an interesting one. It's a whale with legs, and it's walking out of the water. And this particular scientist, when he was hunting through fossil beds in the foothills of the Himalaya mountains, found a skull of a whale and some teeth.